the hardest things for managers at these competitions is to keep everyone happy in the group. And now you're looking, they've gone to 26. It was bad enough. I used to have teams with 80 and then went to 20, and then you go to 22. I don't know how difficult it is at 26, but I'm sure it's not very nice. There'll often be a lot of grumpy heads behind you, Aidan.
South Korean victory, good for the soul. Ghana sends Suarez packing but go home themselves. And Swiss roll on as Serbia go down fighting. Later we'll be joined by Brian Kerr to discuss today's opening round of games in the last 16. But first, Dan, given the amount of controversy and heartbreak at your game today, it must have made you feel like it was 2010 all over again.
Yeah, I mean, narrative, right? Everyone loves a bit of narrative. Is that a word people even used like 5-6 years ago? I'm not even sure. But now you can't get anywhere like in football writing without it. And I mean, really, it delivered a bit of everything. Ghana, Uruguay. I mean, you have the early penalty. Should it have been a penalty? You can argue it. You have the Ghana player missing it. You have Suarez sort of snuffing out their dreams again. All this stuff half written about, there's no such thing as happy endings in football. The villain, the villain sort of the villain wins. This is what happens, and then the energy just completely changed in the stadium. Like, I'll be honest, there was no real sense of imminent danger from the other game at all. And I don't know if that was different at home. Was there a sense of, that something might happen? I think even some stations were showing South Korea-Portugal game, probably because of the Ronaldo angle or whatever. But there was a point in the second half where Valverde at one point tried to score from halfway. He had another brilliant volley in fairness a couple of minutes later. But I sort of mentioned it was almost a bit self-indulgent. It was like, we're fine here, let's have a pop. Ghana had their moments, but Uruguay were generally fine. And I actually was sort of sitting around a couple of people. I was like, hang on, it's 1-1. If South Korea score, Uruguay out here. And then it happened. And you go to the image of Suarez on the bench in tears, and suddenly the Ghana fans were perked up a bit. And
what was the atmosphere like when South Korea scored? There must have been, obviously, because the second half started at different times. So I think the Uruguay-Ghana game was about 6 or 7 minutes behind. I was thinking it must have been very confusing for the Ghanaian players to be playing against a team who were 1 minute happy enough to contain it and next minute going hell for leather for a goal. What was the vibe in the stadium like?
Well, the one thing I'd say, right, it was one of those games where there wasn't a huge amount of fans there from either side. Like, there was more Uruguayan fans than Ghanaian fans, but nothing comparable with, say, the other set American teams, I would say, or maybe they were just a little bit quieter. But even the Morocco Tunisia games, it wasn't comparable with that in terms of the feel. So it wasn't like there was this huge wave of a reaction. It was more little ripples. And yeah, I don't know what it was like for the Ghana players, that it did suddenly turn into this basketball match where I think out of nowhere Ghana were 2-on-2 from a corner that broke down because Uruguay were throwing bodies at it, and they had this incredible extra time, added time, where the Ghana are making this substitute. And the Ghanaians were adamant there was no game playing going on, just adamant the whole way through. There's no issue, there's no revenge, there's no nothing, and yet you were still looking at that going, you're playing a game a bit here, And I mean, Ghana, if they'd scored even in the midst of it, they did score against Portugal late and nearly score again, so they probably were, reasonably, they had their own matters on their mind. But it was, you did see them sprinting back a bit in the 99th minute to defend something with a bit of passion. I refuse to believe that there wasn't playing on their minds in some way. The joy of taking Uruguay out with them to take something.
Oh, very much so, yeah. Very much so. There was if we're going down, we're taking you with us.
Definitely that way. But the thing about it is, though, by obviously going for it, Ghana were also giving Uruguay a better chance to go through. In the midst of that, there was a comical series of mistakes and strewn passes and that finish, and it was crazy. It was crazy stuff. I went down into my first mixed zone in a tournament afterwards. I haven't been in one properly, and it was a few different things got on. The Ghana players didn't go through at all, and there was a bit of anger from there. So 2 or 3 players did, but that was it. But the whole Uruguay squad, after waiting for an hour, 90 minutes, they all came through. at once, and Suarez just stopped and did one TV interview, um, and like Pearl Diego Godin was like had stopped to talk and nearly got knocked over in the scrum of people trying to get to Suarez behind them.
Yeah.
Suarez a couple of lines about sort of FIFA, the Uruguay, the small country, and in a way, it sort of came full circle that the siege mentality that defined their response to 2010 almost ended up being how they departed this, in the sense of what justified 2010 is like, we're Uruguay, we're a small country, no one gives us anything, we fight for it. And 2022, it's more, we're Uruguay, we're a small country, we've been screwed. And, there was, again, there was a lovely narrative to knit it all together.
Yeah, I suppose the funny thing is, like, they went out and won the game 2-0, which, I mean, most people would have expected 2-0 would have been enough to go through, because nobody saw the Portugal result. Well, sorry, not nobody saw the Portugal, but I mean, with the way it panned out, Portugal were on top for so much of the game, and there was a couple of sucker punches. It was incredible stuff the way the game
really
finished.
I haven't seen a bit of it, so
it was a beautiful pass from Son to set up the winner. And again, it's these little margins when you see the 3D offside. I can't think of the exact name that they call it now, something assisted offside, but they're able to show the graphic, and the South Korean player was onside by the studs of the player's boot, kept them onside. These kind of things, and like it certainly does add to the drama. The idea of there being VAR there, certainly at the end of the Uruguay game, where ordinarily it would have been, ref, that's a penalty, and then it not given and you play on. But now you have this sort of second chance of guys drawing imaginary circles or imaginary rectangles in the air, and like that certainly added to the finish with surrounding the referee.
Yeah. Do you think Uruguay were screwed over? So this is the thing. Like,
no, I personally don't.
I don't get. I'm not. I'm with you. I'm with you a bit on this. I'm not feeling the outrage over those decisions. I think the Nunez one, the Cavani one. I don't know. Like, what are you? I don't know. I'm interested in the opinion at home.
Well, I mean, I think certainly on RTE they were certainly that was a stonewall penalty is what that was I think it was Alan Cawley and Kevin Doyle were sort of saying it was a stonewall penalty. Alan Cawley would be quite a creative player. Kevin Doyle was a striker. So, I think if they had a couple of defenders on there, they might have been saying something different about, if I think Cavani was, it's a sort of thing. It's the classic kind of seen him given. But the referee was so adamant that he dived, or that it wasn't enough contact for him to go down, which I would kind of agree with to an extent. I think Cavani brought the contact on himself. That, especially given, was it Valverde who kind of got in the referee's face after the penalty incident?
Yeah,
he was so adamant that, like, I mean, I know you'd never hear these things, but if it was, you'd be tempted to think that the VAR official was saying, maybe go and have a look at that, and him saying, no way, I'm not looking at that, because that obviously didn't happen. But like, he was so adamant that it would have been such a climb down. And again, it wasn't you couldn't say it was a massive mistake. Well, I certainly wouldn't say it was a massive mistake. Uruguay would obviously say it's the sort of incident that if it's for your team, you're absolutely screaming for it. But it's not, then that you're thinking, okay, maybe it was a point.
Yeah, the Uruguayans didn't play the ref particularly well in terms of the game. I mean, Suarez was annoying them. But I suppose, if you have another incident where the ref goes to VAR, you probably think you're about to get your penalty, and you're probably you could certainly build a fairly strong conspiracy theory. I'm just not 100% sure I'm buying it, apart from maybe the ref being not disposed towards them. But all of the decisions, I can see why they were possibly given, but it's no consolation to them. So that was my game today. I didn't do the second set of matches. I was in the Oasis Lounge and they were showing Brazil. So Serbia, Switzerland, I don't have much to offer, but in some way we've sort of half covered Serbia's underwhelming performance.
They put up a bit of a show. They put up a bit of a fight, as literally and figuratively. But like, there was a bit of needle, obviously, with a cut with. I mean, Jack is always involved in these things. There's been needle there before with him, and Serbia. It was an exciting game. At the end, they didn't have much left. The Serbian performance was a little bit like Cameroon, when Cameroon got themselves back. There was still 15-20 minutes to go, and you expected a push, and maybe they're exhausted, but they didn't have didn't seem to have much in the legs. And Switzerland side pretty well. Like Switzerland now face Portugal. I know with the start of the tournament, I said Serbia is a dark horse. Switzerland have come out of that group, and I think they'll fancy their chances against Portugal. And then we have South Korea and Brazil as the last completed game of the last 16 after last night's results. I mean, one more goal for Switzerland and sort of top that group, and that would have changed things completely. But it's certainly set up for the last 16, which we're going to talk to Brian Kerr about today's games in a moment. Today's games being Netherlands, USA at 3, Argentina, Australia at 7. And after the break, we'll hear Brian's verdict on those games. Thanks for joining us, Brian. Have you been enjoying the World Cup so far?
Yeah, I have to a degree. I mean, it's you can't watch it and not think that it's very odd. It's very odd where it is. Very odd, the whole scenario. The fact that the stadiums aren't full and we're getting various announcements about numbers of people at the matches and they can't be true. And you see so many empty seats. But as it's gone on to where we're at now, where we're getting towards the knockout stages and the games have been very much do or die. I think it's been better, although the goals have become scarcer, Aidan, but I have enjoyed it. Yeah. But I'm looking forward to the real knockout games when teams, well, they don't have to go for it from the start of the match, but once there's a goal scored, the games will open up a bit more than a lot of teams in the last games in the group were playing for draws and playing for trying to hold out for 0-0s, although it didn't work out that well for some of them.
Just getting into those knockout stages, Brian, first up, Netherlands and USA. I mean, Louis van Gaal is being very Louis van Gaal in the last week or so in terms of rowing with journalists and such like. What have you thought of the Dutch so far?
Well, I think overall in the group, they've been reasonably impressive. They got 7 points. I mean, they went into the tournament in quite good form. I've seen a good bit of them in the Nations League and so on over the last year or two. But I thought they were dependent very much on Memphis Depay to score goals, and I didn't see where the goals were going to come from other than that. What we've seen is the emergence of Gakpo. He's played very well playing through the middle. I think they had to make that change. They started with Jensen in the first match. Depay had been injured, and Depay eventually played in the tour game against Qatar when they won 2-0. And he looked okay. He still looked like he had a bit to do to get his fitness back. But Gakpo has been impressive. He's played all the time on the left for PSV. Hasn't always been great. There's a bit of a fuss about him now. But I saw the 2 games with Arsenal. He was very poor in them. He hardly got a kick of the ball. He needed a match against Arsenal, which was an indication to me that he had a bit to do to step up to that level. But they've been solid defensively. Obviously, we know the players, Ake, Van Dijk, those sort of players playing defensive positions. De Jong in the middle of the field has been good for them. Davy Klaasen's come into the side. Dumfries in the wing back position has played well. And overall, I suppose they've been quite solid. 2-0 Senegal, 1-1 with Ecuador, 2-0 Qatar. But they haven't set the world alight by any means. But we've seen that with Van Gaal before. Organised, disciplined teams, not giving too much away. Daley Blind's experience in the left-back position, very important for them. So, overall, I suppose that they've done quite well. They've got through the group without too much pain, and I suppose they still have the potential to improve. I think the boy coming back in will give them a lot more. De Jong in the middle of the field, Frankie De Jong still has more to his game than what we've seen, I think, so far.
Do you think that's important for teams going through, that they get through with as little stress as possible, or does that make any difference when you get to the kind of knockout stages? Well,
it makes a difference because it draw-wise, it has an impact on who you play and who you don't play. I mean, if they hadn't performed as efficiently as they did, they'd be in position of playing England rather,
Yeah.
which is am I right in saying that? I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, you are. Yeah.
Yeah, they would,
Yeah.
because Senegal finished second in the group. So I think, that's that. Generally, when you finish first in the group, it gives you're playing the second place team in another group, and it's usually a bit easier. That can go two ways. It's not always the case, but in their case, that's what it's meant. And I think I think they'd be happier with the idea of playing USA rather than playing England. So the fact that and also, you don't have to be great in the group, as we've known from the past. Teams have lost the first game in the group or lost a game in the group, and they've gone on to win the tournament. So it's not, it's not the ultimate to be brilliant in the group stages, but it's also good for confidence, good for team building, good for spirit. And I think Van der Gaal has juggled the team around a bit as well over the matches. He's not played the same team in every game, and he's got a good number of players on the pitch, which I think is very important, because morale was one of the hardest things for managers at these competitions is to keep everyone happy in the group. And now you're looking, they've gone to 26. It was bad enough. I used to have teams with 80 and squads of 80, and then went to 20, and then you go to 22. I don't know how difficult it is at 26, but I'm sure it's not very nice. There'll often be a lot of grumpy heads behind you, Aidan.
Would you be? You're sending the assistants out to talk? Noel O'Reilly would have been a good man, I'm sure, to keep the lads occupied, at least. The lads who weren't playing.
You got to be conscious of that as a coach and the staff, to be aware of. I mean, now it's also it's. Managers have to use players. The games are going on to 110 minutes now at times, or 115 minutes, 110 minutes. So they're using the subs. I was a bit of a skeptic about the number of subs being used, about the increase in the subs number from 3 to 5, and you're looking at it, and half the outfield players that start the match can be gone. 5 fresh players.
Yeah.
But now, in the conditions where it's a bit warm, not every match seems to be particularly hot, but conditions are warm enough, and the games are longer. So I think it's important that managers use squads, and we've seen that across the board now. Managers are using the squads, and players are getting a chance, and I think that helps. I think in terms of morale within the squad, if a manager sticks with the same team, England stuck with the same team first 2 games. Gareth Southgate plays the same team the first 2 matches, exactly the best 11.
Yeah,
I think it was kind of good for him that they didn't play very well in the second match. And it meant, you're going to change for the third match, and then he makes 4 changes for the third match. He gets a few other players on the pitch, and now suddenly there's not many that haven't had some time on the pitch. Only, there's only the odd player who hasn't played, like Maddison, the spare goalkeepers, Ben White, but nearly everybody else has played. So that helps when fellas feel I'm respected and I've got a chance.
Yeah, absolutely. Just briefly on the Dutch opponents, USA, they've been sort of a strange one where they've been in every game and they've looked fairly decent in every game, but they were within a couple of yards of going out of the tournament with it. If that Iran goal had gone in, they'd have been gone. Do you think they'll put it? Do you think they'll put it up to the Dutch?
Well, I think USA have been quite, overall have been quite impressive. I mean, scrappy enough match with Wales early in the first game in the group, but they were better than Wales in the match. Wales had to depend on a penalty to get themselves back in. I think USA are a bit short up front. 0-0 with England. Probably should have won the game. We're probably the better team overall against England. Dominate possession, the midfield area. Been very good in around the middle with Adams and Musa. Been very good. McKinney's been very good for them. Centre backs have been really strong and aggressive. Ream and Zimmerman, Carter Vickers when he's played. Good full backs. Reston Robinson, very busy getting up and down the line. But the area of the pitch, I think they're a bit short. When Wright plays centre forward, Pulisic, great goal against Iran. Really sharp, nice at 1-2 into the box and finish. But without Pulisic firing, they're a bit short, and I don't know whether he's going to be fit for this game or not. Hopefully he will be. Energetic team. Nobody works harder. Very well organised by Halter, the manager, really clear understanding what each player's role is. So I don't think there'll be an easy match in any way for the Netherlands. I think they'll be disciplined, they'll be organised, and I think there'll be a threat on the counter. But I think the centre forward position is a problem for them. As I said, Sargent has looked okay, but Norwich player Wright to me has looked trundling, and I don't think that they could have a good bit of the ball, but they mightn't have enough to score a goal or two to beat Netherlands.
Yeah. The quality is lacking a bit. If that game is going to be close, the Argentina-Australia game, you'd expect it to be one-sided. Australia, again, they've been kind of like everyone seems to underestimate them a little bit, but Argentina definitely didn't have a stress-free time getting into the last 16.
No, it's been awkward for Argentina. Scaloni, the manager, has been under pressure. Losing the first game, obviously, to Saudi Arabia seemed like a bit of a disaster for them, and put them under pressure from the off. Saudi Arabia were fantastic in the match, so huge support behind them. They looked to me like they had the biggest support in Qatar. Maybe Argentina have now, but I thought Saudi Arabia seemed to have an extraordinary support. I mean, it's the nearest country to Qatar, so that's understandable. But great performance. Argentina looked very poor in the match, very slow in the build-up in midfield. Rodriguez plays the holding player. The build-up with the Paul was very poor. Full-backs were ordinary looking. Not much support for Messi. Saudi Arabia got stuck into him, got plenty of players around him every time he looked like getting on the ball. And he found it hard to find space, scored a penalty. But beaten in that little spell, 2 quick goals for Saudi Arabia. Had chances to pull it back, couldn't get. Anyway, they've gone on from there, got over the pressure. Manager made some changes. Scaloni had to make changes. Team looked better against Mexico. Messi, and again, they were finding it difficult. Mexico scrapping and battling in the midfield area, playing very compactly, not allowing much room for Argentina to get the ball into Messi because he's the main man. Eventually, Di Maria squares the ball to him across the box, found that little bit of space, one touch to get him out in front of him, and sticks her in the net, where he's not had very much opportunity or time on the ball in the game. And then the game opens up. Mexico have to go and do something. Fernandez comes on and gets a great goal. And that changed it. Suddenly, they started to look like the team who went 36 games unbeaten before they played Saudi Arabia. Start to look compact, start to look good on the ball. Otamendi at centre half looked more confident. Romero in and out. They're using Martinez some games, Romero other games, but they just looked a better team once the pressure was lifted with the first goal and then the second goal from Fernandez. And I thought they played well against Poland. They looked a team against Poland. So I think Australia will be organised, disciplined, and will have a plan. And a lot of that plan will be about stopping Messi getting on the ball and playing as well as he did in the tour game against Poland. Because even though he missed the penalty, which he has missed lots of penalties in his career, he was still sensational in the match.
Yeah. Brian, that's brilliant. Thanks very much for joining us. Hopefully we'll talk to you later on in the tournament.
Okay, it's a pleasure, Aidan. Look forward to speaking to you again.
Stan, Brian's seeing Netherlands and Argentina progressing, albeit in a couple of tight games with USA and Australia, defensively putting it up to them. I'm seeing much the same thing. I have to say, I couldn't possibly contradict Brian Kerr's views. Do you see any banana skins for either of the favourites?
I don't know if it'll be particularly tight between Argentina and Australia. I fancy Argentina to win that by more than one goal potentially. Netherlands, USA, I mean, Gary Breen is a good column about it. I think he sort of sets it up well. He can see reasons to believe the USA could create a shock, on the basis of they could have won all 3 of their group games in a scenario. And I suppose it's one of those things where Holland, like they won their group. Was it a strong group? Like like you can, and it could turn out that actually maybe it wasn't as bad as you think as well. Like that can go both ways. Was England the USA group? I mean, were Wales just really bad? So there's various ways you can look at it. So I think Argentina to win by more than one goal, and I think Netherlands USA will go to extra time, and I'm sort of tempted to go for a shock. I don't know why. I mean, why not? Like, there's only a prediction. I'm not actually putting any money on it, to be clear. And why hedge? Maybe it'll be spectacularly wrong. But I kind of wonder, could USA nick this one?
Yeah, I think as we said, the USA look like a strong team against good teams. I am a little bit swayed by Brian's assessment in terms of how weak USA are up front, and I think with Gakpo and Depay, I think Netherlands might just nick that. The Argentina game, broadly speaking, I'd agree with you, especially if Argentina score first. If they kind of come out though and think of Australia as, these aren't any great shakes, and they find themselves going behind, it could make for a long evening for them. But again, it's hard to see past Netherlands and Argentina, certainly. So we'll be back to you tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Tomorrow we'll be joined by Pico Lopez with his own memories of facing Senegal as the African champions prepare to take on England. Thanks for listening to the Indo World Cup. Watch us on YouTube or independent.ie or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.